So we'll start. It's difficult to know what to focus on because this Sedra, which is past as SHOFTIM, very often comes at the beginning of Elul, and as it does this year. And Elul, you should know, needs to be tuned into as a very special time. The Frierdiker Rebbe talks about very fondly remembering that in Lubavitch, in Russia, they used to talk about an Elul wind, which you could feel eerily blowing through the township and through people. And the concept is that we've got less than a month for the year to run out. We have less than a month to get serious with one's own introspection. It's a time when we are challenged to make what's called a heshbon nefesh, which means a balance sheet of one's achievements, spiritual achievements in the year, and to the extent that you're pleased with your progress, recognize that and understand that one can do better, and to the extent that one is not pleased with one's progress, you have the opportunity to do tshuva and improve that way. Doing either one of those energies, tshuva is it's not for this year, for another night, different time, but tshuva is one of the spiritual energies of which are make atomic energy look like a matchstick, a match flame, and if one learns to ride that rocket, it's a hugely beneficial thing, and we'll get to that because Elul is the month of tshuva. So, but not tonight. So tonight, I really want to do Inyonim from Parshat SHOFTIM, but before we do, it's just important to get a background together, and that is that maybe it's time to close the door. What do you think? It's cold now.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, if you don't mind. I don't think anyone else is coming now. So.
Yes, wide open.
Huh?
It's wide open, you know.
Yeah, it's cold. So we have this concept that we get a special pass in this month. In these 28 days, 30 days, there's the concept of Melech Besoda, which means the king is in the field. It means that during the rest of the year, the moshel goes like this, that the king is in his palace, and to get into the palace, you've got to be accredited, and you've got to have the right protectia, and you've got to wear the right clothes, and you've got to have a business that's approved, and you've got security guards and all the rest of it. And to get to see the king it works on merit. Comes the month of Elul, and we learn that the king is in the field. That means that no security guards, no special clothes, no merit. The king is there, and he is receiving everyone with a smiling countenance and a welcoming disposition. Now what that that's baby talk, but what it really means is that, and these are bombshells. You got to know, we use these words so easily, but they're bombshells. The truth is that we live 60, 70, 120 years, whatever it is, and most people, we talk about this often, the Rebbe has stressed this often, most people have no idea why they were born, what they do all their lives, and what they're supposed to achieve. They have no business plan. They're born without a manual. They have no idea. And as each year ticks by, if you stop most people and ask them to measure what was the benefit of that year, they'll tell you about the meals that they ate, or the parties that they went to, or the possessions that they bought, or the pleasures that they gratified themselves with. And it's not a satisfactory list. There are very few people who will tell you how fantastic that list was for them. Usually they'll lament that they didn't have more of this or more of that or whatever. Now, that's not how a Jew is fulfilled. A Jew is fulfilled by the building of his relationship with his God. And this is a one-to-one matter. We don't, somebody brought this up last week at the Shir, I think, saying that Rabbi Friedman said that Judaism is not a religion. And it's not. And what that person was trying to say was that our life as Jews, learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, making a dira b'tachtonim, making a dwelling place for Hashem in physicality, bringing Ruchnius into Gashmius and elevating Gashmius into Ruchnius, that is a private building experience between a man and his God. And most people just are unaware of it and tragically don't access it. And when it comes to the month of Elul, and we've really got an opportunity, the first step is to understand that opportunity is available, and available like it is at no other time in the year. So let's go back to the example from last week with mezuzah. We have an ordinary mitzvah of mezuzah that everybody knows, and you come closer to learning more Torah, you learn that you've got to have a mezuzah on your door, and then you learn how many doors it's got to be, and then if you learn better, you learn that the mezuzah is a protection. And if you learn even better, you get to the point where instead of going to the doctor, you're tempted to check the mezuzahs first. Why? Because one has learned what the koyach, what the power of the energy of a mezuzah is. But still, they're still missing it, because when you watch let's forget about men. When you watch the Rebbe walk through a doorway in 770, his hand would go up automatic. Well, nothing the Rebbe did was automatic, but his hand would go up and he'd kiss the mezuzah. What's he doing? What's he doing when he puts his hand up and kissing the mezuzah? Tell you what he's doing. When you drop your son or your grandson off at school and the kid is about to leave the car, and the kid comes and gives you a kiss goodbye, and you are flooded with love for that kiss, for that kid, because he is engendering from you that love by giving you that kiss. That's what we are doing with the mezuzah. We're kissing our God as we leave the car, or as we enter the house, or as we leave the house. And that focus, that perspective, is the perspective that you try and build in the month of Elul. In the month of Elul, it's available. So you're impoverished if you don't see and seize that opportunity of that building. Things are more accessible. Davening is answered much more easily. You need much less merit. It's a time when your dialogue with your God shows open fruit. So, l'chaim. Now, Parshat SHOFTIM. First of all, I'll just read you the introductory words. SHOFTIM. SHOFTIM means judges. V'shoitrim means policemen. Titain lecha, will give you bechol shorecha, in all your gates. So we have a mitzvah. Let's understand the basic mitzvah straight away, to appoint judges and policemen. Both of those appointees are mandated midoraisa. They're a mitzvah. We have to have judges. We have to have policemen. And the chassidus of this is what we're going to be learning. This is the chassidus year. So it's not difficult to understand at the first level of depth to this is that when we have to have shoftim v'shoitrim to tein lecha b'chol shorecha in all your gates. What's a gate? A gate is an entrance. So we have various entrances. We have our eyes, we have our nose, smell, sight, smell, taste, our mouth, and those are entrances. And before we even get to judges, we need policemen at those gates. And you should know that the average Jewish Joe, without learning Hasidus, is going to neglect that, not because he's bad, God forbid, or doing anything wrong, but because he just doesn't know. But you are the gatekeeper. I am the gatekeeper of what goes into me. And you have to understand that's a huge responsibility to yourself. And what is going into you, and we know that from the time of Adam Arishan, what goes into you is partly bad. So the question is, how much of it do you let in? And what is your standard of what you're letting in? So, I mean, the Shema talks about the problem of what we're running after our eyes, and anyone with any level of honesty is going to understand that they do that, and anyone with any brains is going to work out that looking back over that process, it isn't helpful. Ultimately, it's not helpful in your life. So the first step to understand with this is that we are, just as in building this relationship with our God in the month of Elul, as well as then throughout the year, you've got to know who the driver is. Now, we've learned over and over again that Hashem is creating the world every moment, every microsecond, and therefore everything that's happening is happening by divine control, and therefore Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, is happening to us, and we don't control that. What we control is how we react to that, and how we react to that needs to be in accordance with Torah and mitzvahs. And when we react to that in accordance with Torah and mitzvahs, we build a spiritual reality and a spiritual world, and we grow as Jews and human beings. So when we talk about these gates and being the policeman at the gates, at the end of the day, we decide how much Torah gets in. We decide how many mitzvahs we do with that body that we have. And really, we're now talking at a deeper level, and I'm sorry if this gets too I mean, you've got long history with this. I don't need to explain much of this to you, but we're talking about the dynamic that we have every day of our lives between the nefesh elokis and the nefesh habahamis, between the godly soul and the animal soul. The animal soul is hardwired to look after gratification and avoid pain and injury. Hardwired. That's how you're born. And the nefesh elokis, the godly soul, is there to encourage us to build that relationship with our God and grow and flower and reach a life of happiness and fulfillment. And that dynamic starts off right here, right at the very beginning, at the gates. You need a mezuzah at your gates, and you'd always. And the mezuzah at your gates, and you go, of course it has to be a physical mezuzah. But beyond the physical mezuzah, it needs to be a perspective. It needs to be a perspective of what sort of a life do you really want. And it's very confusing because the pleasures are manifest and obvious, and the growth is covered and secret and difficult to find. But it's immeasurably different. I had we were bringing here one night there was a shliach here, and somebody who didn't know better, nothing wrong, just said, you know, that life for a shliach is very hard. It's very hard. I mean, you were talking about it before. And he said, why would you do it? And I'll never forget this, that he looked at him so kindly and he said, it's harder, but it's better. And that's the truth. If you get to choose what sort of a life you want. You can have a life which is in accordance with Torah and mitzvahs and building a relationship with your God, or you can have a life you live like an animal. So what gratifies you is good, what doesn't gratify you is bad, what hurts you is even worse, and you spend your life dodging between those currents. That's one way to live a life. That's not how we live a life in Elul. In the month of Elul, you try and dominate all of that and try and readjust, refocus one's perspective to what is really important. And what's really important for a Jew is not the same thing as what's really important for a non-Jew. That doesn't mean we're any better than non-Jews. Don't get this wrong. I don't want any emails after the shir for the people who listen. I'm not saying Jews are better than non-Jews. I'm saying that we have a different shlichus.
Yep.
We have a different mission in life. Our mission is to bring spirituality into physicality and elevate physicality into spirituality. Gentiles' job is to build Gashmis, is to build physicality. They've done a wonderful job. We've got power, we've got museums and electricity and all the mod cons, technology and everything else. Sure, Jews have been instrumental in building that and lending their intellect to doing that. But that is primarily the job of Gentiles. And there are 8.5 billion nefashos on this planet busily doing that. And there's maybe 15 million Jews on the planet, Alavai, and our job is to bring Ruchnius into that Gashmius which the nations are building. And if you don't get in tune with that purpose, you live a disappointed life. A Jew lives a disappointed life. And I can tell you, especially in the later years, I have a legal practice in Double Bay, as everybody knows, and it's been a successful practice, Baruch Hashem, and I've had a lot of clients, and a lot of them have been rich because we're in the eastern suburbs, etc. And the tragic thing about many Jews is that they're Holocaust survivors or children of Holocaust survivors, and they honestly thought their salvation was in money. And so they dedicated their lives to generating money. I'm not saying that money's not good. Everybody should. Hashem's not short, and we're coming up to the new year, so we should give each other a bracha that Hashem should make everybody billionaires. I'm not minimizing the importance of money. Everybody needs money.
It's not the main goal.
But if that's your main perspective, you're standing at the great. I'm now in my 80s, Baruch Hashem, and I've got clients who are all in their 80s, many of whom are in their 80s and 90s, and they're standing at the edge of their rookwood graves, and they've got nothing in their hands. It's tragic. Yeah. They got $1 billion. They got hundreds of million, not hundreds, but many of them have got $50, $100 million, right? And they're standing there and they've got nothing. And that's so sad. What is it that they've missed out on? They've missed out on this private, personal, relationship building perspective with their God.
Have you told them that?
Can I deal with questions afterwards?
Yeah, sure,
because
sure.
I don't want to get to. It's not a Fabring, and I don't want to get waylaid.
Okay.
We've got to get to some stuff here.
Okay.
So, but I certainly will answer that before we're finished. Look, that's stupid. I'm going to do it now. I took years and years ago. I took advice from my mashpia, and he said, the ruling that I got was that I was not to do that unless I was asked. That I should answer any questions that I'm asked, but I shouldn't volunteer any sermonizing because it makes it more expensive for them to come to me than to go to anyone else. And what I should do is make sure that I do the best I can and then give tzedakah with that, rather than lecturing them and making it inconvenient for them to come. So that's the answer to your question. Okay, so now, our legal system, which when we talk about, that was about policemen and about what one should be doing. In terms of judges, when the Torah says SHOFTIM, that judges you'll appoint, I think one of the things that we need to understand is and it says that you appoint them in order that there should be justice. So what's justice mean? Justice, if we try and define justice, I suppose you have to say it has to do with fairness, righteousness, giving everybody their fair due, not discriminating against anybody when you're applying law, that the law should be even-handed and applicable to everybody. There should be no bribery, no corruption. But in our system, you should know, I'm just going to deal with a couple of legal things as just because it is this Parsha and there's lots of laws in it. Our legal system, unlike the British legal system, the Australian legal system, works on witnesses. Witnesses or documents. Our system works on documents, but witnesses are a critical part of the Torah legal system. So if you have, so you need witnesses to achieve a legal result. And we have wild paradoxes with this. And they're each one of these things, we can spend, honestly, months of shiurim on each one, on the depths of wisdom of each one of these. I'll give you a simple example. We have a statement that a man's confession is worth 100 witnesses, right? So in money matters, we're talking about money matters, somebody comes to court and says, you owe me $100, and he says, no, I don't. You need 2 witnesses to prove that he does, and he owes the money. If he says, I owe you the money, you don't need any more witnesses, you don't need anything else, that's the end. Right? With corporal punishment, which we believe in, and if I have to justify that, it has to be at a different share, or the death penalty, which we also subscribe to. Very, very rare in Jewish history, all of these things, and I should really go through all of that because the tape's on, but we won't have time. But let me just say that we subscribe to corporal punishment and the death penalty under certain circumstances. In our history, in our tradition, Jews are not cruel people, and therefore it was very, very rare. However, it exists. Now, what happens if a man comes and says, yes, I murdered him. I confess, I murdered him. And there are no witnesses. Does he get convicted or not? He doesn't. Why? Huh? No, but he's confessed.
Oh, he's confessed. Right.
Now, if you for money, if he confessed, you don't need any witnesses.
Right.
Now, if he confesses, not only do you still need witnesses, his confession is not accepted. Right?
He might
Why?
not be of sane mind.
Sorry?
He might not be of sane mind.
Let's say he is of sane mind. Let's say he is. You're right. That could be true. But even if he's of sane mind, even if he's a total mental genius, vigorous. So the whole question is, who does your life belong to? That's the issue. And that's an issue that we're talking about in the month of Elul. This is an issue for you and me. Who owns your life? Who's driving? And who owns it? So it's explained in Hasidus. It's explained in Gemara. It's explained in Gemara that your money, your possessions are your property. So because they're your property, then you can take a balance of probabilities, or you can take, or you have to have witnesses, and then they can rule on what happens to your property because you own it. But with your life, you don't own it. You have it on trust. In the same way as we have tzedakah. Let's take another example. Tzedakah. We have to give a certain amount of money in tzedakah. Al pi halakha. There are two sorts of tzedakah, as I think we learned last week. There's those things that's called maisa, where it's like a tax. And there's when a poor man comes to you and puts his hand out and says, I need to eat. And you've got to give him. So what is the reason that you've got to give him? If you stop a Gentile in the street, Christians, for example, I said this last week, I went to a Christian school, and they had a mantra, neither a borrower nor a lender be. Right? That's part of Christianity. That's part of their Lahavdul Torah. So you should know that is absolute antithesis of what we believe. We have an obligation to lend, and if you need, you have an obligation to borrow. Why? Because we believe that money is moving on trust by Hashem. That Hashem is directing that traffic. You think you are directing that traffic, you don't get it. Money is a brocha. Some people are so, and if you stop people and you say, why do you have so much money? If they're not self-conscious and they know you will, they'll tell you that I'm very clever, or I'm very industrious. I've worked hard. I've made my luck. Right? Nothing could be further than the truth. I testify. I keep saying this. I've had a practice for so many years with so many rich Jews, and some of them are the most stupid, lazy idiots you've ever met in your life. It's a bracha. And I know Talmidei Chachamim, so do you, who can learn and who have deep wisdom and understanding, high-level intellect, a terrific ability to analyze, cannot rub 2 cents together. And if they get it, it's gone in 5 minutes. You know that.
Yeah.
So there are, with tzedakah, we learn that we're just trustees, and that's why we have to give tzedakah, because we're not giving what's ours. We don't have a right to say, this is mine. It's not mine. You have it on trust from Hashem. And a certain amount of that you have an obligation to deal with in accordance with Torah. The same thing is true with your life and your body. I'll give you an example with your body. You know, it's a big shiloh whether you can smoke. I don't know if you know. I mean, Rambam's paskins as a matter of halakha that you cannot do something injurious to your body that is known to be injurious to your body. So until everybody knew that smoking was bad for you, everybody smoked. The Baal Shem Tov smoked. And they used to had the whole thing about it being like ketoris, what do you call it, the incense, the whole spiritual things with it. When in the early 50s, no, it must have been in the late 40s, it first became medical, it was first posited that there was a connection between emphysema and breathing difficulties, etc. The Rebbe, who was, and the Frierdiker Rebbe was a chain smoker, you should know. And the Rebbe was a very big smoker. They finished, they stopped smoking that day. Did they take Nicorette? Did they go out to a withdrawal place? Did they go to a camp? They didn't do any of those things. As a matter of Rotzen, if suddenly it's contrary to halakha, they're out. Close the door, gone. Why? Because the guf doesn't belong to us. The guf's on trust. And if you want to test that ever, try getting younger. Try getting younger 10 years. You might have surgical intervention to remove the wrinkles. But that's not true. It's just a defacing of the body, of the guf. It's arguable whether that's permitted. Anyway, we're not going to go into that at the moment. At the moment, I just want to make the point that the reason that a confession is not accepted for a capital case is that you cannot be the determiner of the verdict of whether you're guilty or not of a capital crime. It has to be by witnesses. Why? Because it's not yours to give away. It's not yours to make a confession which allows you to be killed. Okay. With this judges comes an enormous investiture of power. Hashem has entrusted with this mitzvah of SHOFTIM v'SHOTRIM. He has, you see, let's go back a step for general principles that we learn over and over again in this year. If we have a mitzvah, you have to be able to do it. Otherwise, it's not fair. How can you ask somebody to do a mitzvah if they can't do it? You can't ask somebody to run in the marathon if they've got broken legs, right? You can't. So when we are given a mitzvah by Hashem, it is absolutely clear that you must have the capacity, not only the capacity to deal with it, but the ability to make it grow and flower. And we've had shiurim on this. The best example is happiness. We haven't got time to do that tonight, but when we are given the power to have judges, that means human beings, Jews, who use their seichel and midos to determine what is just. And we went through a definition of justice before, right? So if they are given that power, you have to understand that that is a big koyach, and that power is a big energy. So, and it is an incredible energy. I'll give you a wild example. The penalty for knowingly violating Yom Kippur by eating is kores. Kores means premature death. There's a question of whether that premature death applies anymore when there isn't a Sanhedrin, when there isn't a Beis HaMikdash. But you should know that biblically, knowingly trampling on Yom Kippur is punishable by death. And what does that mean? That not fasting, because you've got an obligation to fast 26 hours on Yom Kippur. Now, the problem is that in biblical times, who says what day Yom Kippur is? We say that Yom Kippur is the 10th day of Tishrei. That means 10 days after Rosh Chodesh. But Rosh Chodesh isn't fixed like it is in our calendar. It's fixed in our calendar because all the mathematical geniuses like Rabbi, what's his name, they can work it out. But it worked on witnesses witnessing the new moon. Yeah. And when they witnessed the new moon and certified to the fact that there was a new moon, that's when Rosh Chodesh was. So Jews create or are witnesses to Rosh Chodesh, and that means that they paskin when Rosh Chodesh is, which means that they paskin when 10 days later when Yom Kippur is. So we have a whole thing in the Gemara that Rabbi Yeshua calculated one day for Yom Kippur, and Rabbi Gamliel and the Sanhedrin calculated the next day. So which was first? I can't remember who was first and who was second, but the story is that as a matter of proving his obedience to the majority, because we learn that the halakha is according to the majority. You can't decide halakha on a bus coil, on a voice out of him. In fact, there's another Gemara where they're arguing about something. I think it's to do with purity, with Tomei and Tahoe. And one said, and the majority said one thing, and whoever it was said that if he's right, water will run uphill, and the water runs uphill, and the trees will shake, and the trees shook, and I can't remember what the various things were. And then there'll come a bus coil from heaven, and a bus coil from heaven came and said, it's like Rebbe so-and-so. And the Hachamim were unmoved, and they said the Torah is on earth, and the Torah has its laws. Lo b'shamayim. Yeah, that's right. And it's on earth, and once we paskin as a majority, that's what it is. Now, there's a story in the Gemara where Rebbe Yeshua calculated Yom Kippur, and Rebbe Gamliel and the Sanhedrin said no, it's the other day, it's either the day before or the day after, whichever the logic is. And Rebbe Gamliel orders Rebbe Yeshua to come to Yerushalayim with his staff, that means carrying in the public domain, with his money bag, which you can't use on Shabbos and Yom Tov, it's muktzah, and present himself and he does. Right?
Mishnah Rosh Hashanah,
yeah? Yeah, Mishnah Rosh Hashanah. And he does. And that means that if he doesn't listen to the Sanhedrin, and he's wrong, he can have the death penalty. Mm-hmm. So the judges have the koyach that is so strong that they can even override a mitzvah d'oraisa, which is accompanied by the death penalty. So when you hear somebody say, "Oh no, it's only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan," don't be fooled. I mean, in many cases, in fact, generally, the halakha that's accorded by the Rabbanim is more serious. So anyway, we have That's the koyak of judgment. Then we Then we come to, we're talking about the power of the Sanhedrin and the majority ruling, and I just want to tell you of a midrash. There's a midrash that says this, that a king had many children, but the youngest one he loved the most. So he took his favorite thing and gave it to his favorite child. What was the favorite thing? It was his favorite orchard. This is all baby language, but it's really deep code, right? I'll explain in a minute. He took his, he wanted to give the thing he loved most in the world to the child he loved most in the world. And he took his orchard, his favorite orchard, and gave it to Am Yisrael. That's what the Midrash says. So that code is broken in the following way. What's the difference between an orchard and a field? A field grows what you need to survive: wheat, grain, whatever it is. An orchard grows fruit and dainties and things that are pleasurable and beautiful. A field is utilitarian. Basic. An orchard is for beauty and pleasure. What is the child being Am Yisrael? Hashem loves Am Yisrael. And again, I don't want this to be a story about how Jews are better than non-Jews. He loves Am Yisrael for the shlichus that he's given them, and the fact that they are doing that. And if you want proof of that, have a look at Am Yisrael High. Look at it. We lived in a gutter of blood for 3,500 years, and we're still here. And you know, just at the time that Albanese and Penny Wong are at their height of criticism, the Israelis showed ASIO that Iran was behind and they've got to go on television and condemn it and rub their own noses in their own feces. Hashem is looking after Am Yisrael for whatever spiritual reasons, which is other shiurim. And now, there's a problem with this midrash, serious problem for us, because are you telling me, asked the Rebbe, that justice, I'm sorry, I've left out a step in this. When Hashem gives his orchard, it's asked, what is the orchard? That which Hashem loves the most is justice. That's what it says. And why does Hashem love the young boy the most? Because of bittul. We'll come to that in a minute. Because of being humble. Because if a Jew spends, I'll give you a simple example of this from what we've been talking about. If you and I spend the precious moments of the month of Elul on our self-improvement journey because we want to be able to say, oh, look at me, look how I've grown, look how terrific I am, the whole thing's for nothing. It's worse than nothing. I'll take 2 minutes to tell. I told somebody last week or the week before. Has everyone heard of Y.Y. Jacobson? No. Yeah. So Y.Y. Jacobson came here once.
He's the best speaker in the world.
Best speaker in the world, and he was talking. He told us the story that the first time he went out to speak for Chabad, Rabbi Klein called him in and said, look, you're going out to speak for on behalf of Chabad. You have to know you're talking for the Rebbe. And when you're finished speaking, if people come over to you and say, you were fantastic, you're the best speaker I've ever heard, you are just unbelievable, you're fantastic, I salute you, know that you have failed utterly. This is what he told me. Know that you have failed utterly. But if people come to you afterwards and say, because of your speech, I'm going to learn more Torah, I'm going to do more mitzvahs, know that you've succeeded. Right? So it's not enough that we are spending Elul being awakened to the fact that Melech Besada, that the king is in the field and there's an opportunity for growth, and we're learning Parshat SHOFTIM and learning, but it's got to be with a level of humility. Now, what does that humility mean? Does it mean that he's got to think he's a rotten speaker? He doesn't have to think. That's madness. He's a wonderful speaker. He has to know that he's a wonderful speaker. But so what? That fact that he is a wonderful speaker, that's a talent given to him by God. He didn't do it. He didn't do anything he may have learned some tips here and there, but basically he's fulfilling a talent. And that's God-given. And what he should be worried about is his responsibility with that talent. So that's what Rabbi Klein was saying to him. He was saying to him, if people come over and congratulate you, you've done nothing. All you've done is use the talent that God gave you. And how do you know you used it well enough? How do you know you couldn't have been twice as persuasive? The only test is, what is the effect of that in terms of, is there any more good being brought into the world or not? And if there is, you've been successful. And it's got nothing to do with the God-given talent. So going back to the Midrash, when it says that Hashem is giving to that which he loves the most to the people that he loves the most, when it says the people he loves the most, it doesn't give us ground for gaiva, for arrogance. On the contrary, it's got to be with bittul. What does that mean? It means that Hashem has invested you and me with certain powers and capabilities. I'll tell you this right now. If I was giving this talk to a bunch of Koreans, or the cleaning ladies that we have, and very intelligent and lovely ladies that we have, a couple of women who work here, Filipinos, they're not in the house, of course, at the moment, but they wouldn't know what I'm talking about. All of you know what I'm talking about. Why does all of you know what I'm talking about? Because you have a neshama, which is a helik Eloka mimal, and that is it, and these things are familiar to you at some level or another. It's familiar to you, whether you've learned any Torah in your life or not. It's still home. I challenge you to tell me in any honesty. I don't want to answer to this, but I'm just saying what I'm saying to you. When we Jews learn Torah together, you're going back home. Whether you heard it before or not, whether you learned it before or not, it's our territory. So Hashem has given us that. Now, does that make us better than anybody else? It doesn't. It means that we've been given a certain hush to do certain things. And the question is, how we discharge that responsibility. But there's a big question here. The Rebbe says, so if Hashem's great love is justice, right? And he gave that great love to his great loved one, Am Yisrael. What about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach? The Gentiles we have 613 mitzvahs, they have 7. The 7th of their mitzvahs is to establish courts of justice and the legal system, right? So if Hashem took his favorite thing, the best orchard, to give to his youngest child who he loves the most, who's Am Yisrael, how do you explain the seventh law of Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach? So Rebbe says a wonderfully empowering thing, which is really worth spending time with in the month of Elul. He explains this, that there are two levels of justice. There's one level of justice where the law, which you have to have with policemen, is interpreted by the judges. People have a dispute. This is my talus, this is my talus. They take it to the court, and the court will call for witnesses, and there'll be interrogation, and they'll come to a conclusion. That's the law. That's paskening on the law as it is. But then there's a different level of justice altogether. And only Am Yisrael have this. And that is that we make the law. That we take a Chumash, you can read it, if you're a slow reader, in an hour and a half, cover to cover. Moshe Rabbeinu spent 40 days and 40 nights, twice and three times on Har Sinai, getting all the background information. That background information is in the Mishnah, which you quoted to me for Rosh Hashanah, and then in the Gemara, and law is created, providing that law is created by certain rules, and once it's created, it becomes law, and it becomes new law. And let me tell you something else. If Tony tomorrow, I'll give you an example. If Tony tomorrow wrote a book on tzedakah, on the laws of tzedakah, right? And he stuck to the laws of the exegesis, as it's called, if he stuck to the Torah laws of what he's writing, his book becomes a piece of Torah. And I'll give you some news. Nobody can really read his book when they wake up in the morning without making the bracha on Noisei HaTorah. Mm-hmm. You can't, because it's Torah. It becomes Torah. It becomes part of our. Now, if he's not learned enough and he doesn't use the rules properly, and then it's not. But if it does, it is. And that's why Torah is it's an expanding library throughout our history. Now, what's the big secret of that? The big secret of that is that when we learn that we are a partner with Hashem in creation, suddenly it makes a huge amount of sense, because we, together with our God, with whom we're building this relationship, we are partners with him in creating the life that we are living in Gashmias. So this Midrash is, the Mesholim in Torah are not for babies, they're exact. So when it says that Hashem chooses what he loves the most, which is justice, then you have to understand what level of justice that is, to give it to the people he loves the most. You've got to understand what that means. And then, when you do understand what that means, you suddenly understand the dynamic of what's going on and what's available as an opportunity in this month of Elul, in the month of Elul. So I've got to listen to it as well as you do, guys. L'chaim, l'chaim. Now, I don't have to answer the question. We did it.